So I thought what we could talk about today, and I've been asked this probably 3 or 4 times in the last month.
Yeah.
You know, this walk that you and Bob went on back in 1997, sorry. What the heck happened on that walk, right? Like, and so I'll set it up in terms of how we got to the walk, and then we can just so what was happening in the company at that point is we had one store. You and Mary made a commitment to build a second store. You'd signed a lease, you were working on that. I had been a barista working with Mary from openings 6 a.m. till 2 p.m. Monday through Friday for about 5 months at that point. And y'all were looking for a manager. And Mary said, "Hey, Bob, I think you should talk to this Mike guy," right? So and so we set up a time. We didn't know each other because you worked 3 p.m. till close. The only time I ever saw you was I had asked for permission to leave my car in the parking lot when I walked over to the university to work on the research project I was working on. And so oftentimes when I'd come back to get my car, I would stop in and get a coffee. And you and I would have an opportunity, in that moment, you were serving me a drink. And I remember on many occasions getting that drink and taking a sip and just being like, God, this is good. And so we sat down to talk, sort of classically interview style, sitting at a cafe table across from each other. And I remember it didn't take us but probably 3 minutes to say, "Hey, I think you said it. Hey, do you want to just go for a walk?" Because it was beautiful out. Remember, it was like a beautiful spring day. That first day in the springtime when you can kind of smell spring, it was probably 70 degrees. And so we popped up, we went for a walk. And at the end of that walk, we shook hands. We agreed to start a new company that would be the company that we would use to grow, scale, whatever BIGGBY Coffee. We didn't have any inclination of what that would look like at that point. The next day I went to the university. I resigned my research position there and I went full time. I became assistant manager of store number 2, taking over from you, the closing shift. So you could focus on the development of the second store. Okay, so that's the frame up. I've been asked a number of times that, what in the hell happened on that walk? How can two guys that don't know each other go on a walk and then basically shake hands, and then that turns into a 28-year partnership? I mean, if I didn't live that story, Bob, I wouldn't believe it, right? Like these are the kind of stories that like people hear about. It's like, oh yeah, sure. They're crafting their origin story to make it, more dramatic than it was. But I mean, God's honest truth, on my grandmother's grave, that is a true story.
It's exactly what happened. And I know it seems impossible and it seems incredulous that would happen. I mean, it's akin to like in the old Hollywood days where somebody would get discovered at a diner, and become a famous actor because some director walked in or something like that.
Exactly.
And I think there's a couple things to know. One, although you were a barista, you had already had a professional sales career down in Houston, Texas. You were at a point of transition, working on your master's at MSU, and you were using the barista job to sort of pay rent a little bit and have a little beer money, so to speak, So it wasn't that you were a barista in in a traditional sense, and maybe there is no traditional version of a barista, but you were parking yourself here to get by through your master's. So you were a person of exception already, right? And that has to be noted, not to downplay the fact that you went from barista to CEO, which is a great story. I just watched one of your
Thank you.
interviews in Cleveland, and I just thought it was a great interview. But so that has to be noted. I think a couple other things to note is is that we're both itchy people. And by that, I mean, it wasn't by accident that we ended up on a walk. I mean, the idea of the two of us sitting at a table for more than 5 minutes to do an interview is just a ridiculous thought if you know the both of us, right? Of course, we had to get out, not be contained, and that type of thing. For me, walking and talking has always been really productive, and even when I work at a desk, I often need something going on in the background in order for me to concentrate. And walking does that for me when walking and talking. I know what's his name that started Apple. He used walking and talking. Not that we were emulating that. It just I don't think it's as uncommon as it might seem. It's
And in 1990, when this walk happened, Steve Jobs' story wasn't documented either.
yeah, right. Okay, well, there you go. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But what was discovered on that walk was how similar our backgrounds were, right? So, and it's not like we both said out loud, "Hey, gee whiz, our backgrounds are similar," but there became a comfort level very quickly, a shorthand, so to speak. I think we're also just very blunt people. Like we cut to the chase, and we appreciate others that do that, right? And so there was a quick shorthand and a quick appreciation, I think, between the both of us. The other thing that was discovered in that walk was a level of ambition. And either of us were going to do it by hook or crook, but we had some pretty big goals in mind for ourselves individually. And this is, putting BIGGBY, or it was then called Beaners, aside for a moment. I think we always had that sort of vision for ourselves, and what we saw in each other was a companion that could actually achieve that vision. We didn't discover this until much, much later, but it made a lot of sense. But we both value loyalty, and we both value legacy. And I would guess that somehow that manifested itself during that walk, right?
Yeah. Can I tell that story?
Yeah, please.
Well, first, let me just say that I think those three things were sort of the bedrock of feeling comfortable, right? But the loyalty and legacy thing, I'll just tell that story because it's unreal.
Mm-hmm.
We were at a retreat. I'm not sure which group it was, but it was one of the forums that we'd established. And as part of that retreat, we always brought the Dale Carnegie person in to facilitate a conversation in the evening. And they have this game they play that you get, I think it's 50 cards, and every one of them has like a value on it, something you value for your life, right? So, it could be family, it could be, there's all kinds of different values on these cards, and there's a little blurb that explains it and so on. And so what they do is they give you the 50 cards, and then they say, okay, Now in 2 minutes, narrow it down to 10. So you're going through, you're scrambling, you eliminate 40. Now you got 10 left. And then they give you another minute to get it down to 4 or whatever. And then they give you another minute to get it down to 2. And those 2 are your, you know, your primary values, right? So then they start going around the table and you list off your 2 cards. And I remember it started over here. You were like the 4th person. You and I were sitting right across the table from each other. And you turned over your first card and it was loyalty. And you talked about that. And you turn over your second card and it was legacy. And I sat there and I mean, I just got shivers thinking about it right now. My 2 cards were loyalty and legacy. And I mean, yes, that is again a mythical kind of story, but you know, as true as it is long. And so you know, the walk, I really think that also one little additional piece is I think you and I both understood or had a belief in living life sort of in an unconventional way.
Yeah.
And that not signing up for the standard program. You know, as an example, and if you don't want me to tell the story, we'll go back and edit it out. But
no, it's okay.
You know, you're
I lost my dignity a long time ago.
no, it was, I think it's a great story. And I think it epitomizes you, which is your dad asked for your grades, like in your first semester of college, to see your grades. And you said no. And then your dad said, well, if I'm going to pay for college, then I should have the right to see your grades. And then you said, well, you don't need to pay for college. And then you walked away from essentially a full ride scholarship to pay for it yourself. And it took you 9 years to complete that degree. You know, and in the moment that probably seemed, I mean, it was crazy, I guess, but very, very unconventional, right? And then you know, I have stories in my life too about things that I did that were just very unconventional, not going with the flow, not doing the standard program, right? And so I think that trait was also something that really drew us together. And I think we told a lot of stories on that walk, and we talked about our history and how we, you know, and then also for me, and this I talk regularly about success is about understanding what is an opportunity, a true opportunity, and what isn't, right? And I know that in my 5 months of working with you, well, not with you, but working for you and Mary at this store, I really, really began to sense a true opportunity, not only in the business or the market, but that you and Mary were doing something very, very different in the coffee space that nobody else was doing, which was treating a coffee shop like a high volume restaurant, running a coffee shop like a high volume restaurant. And so, you know, that I mean, I was in the space of really beginning to understand the opportunity that was there as well, right? And so, and what you'd put together was, and by the way, is, because we're still doing it, extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, it's an extraordinary model. It's an extraordinary mechanism that now we've all created, right? But it was the formation of it, those first years, it was extraordinary.
It was, and thank you for saying so. I would also say there was no doubt that both Mary and I weren't effing around. I mean, the intensity at which we approached the business was palpable, you know, and you could go work for a lot of people and never ever experience that. But here we were trying to start this thing that people didn't really understand why they should come, and why specialty coffee was different and what it was all about. And I mean, we were leaning in so hard.
Yeah. I one of the exercises in my class, I don't know if I've ever told you this.
Mm-mm.
I did a podcast, and I was talking about our partnership, and why I appreciated you as a partner, and so on. And I told the story that early in my tenure as assistant manager of store one, you came in one day and you said, "Hey, Mike, we have a rule that every customer gets greeted within 3 paces of the door." I'm like, yeah, man. Right? And you're like, well, you weren't doing it last night. I'm like, whoa, wait, and then you said, between 10:17 and 10:28 or 12, whatever it was, there was nobody at the cash register waiting to greet that next customer that walked in the door. You were off doing the closing stuff, right? I'm like, oh shit, and I said, okay, and I think I hope I responded in a healthy way. I don't know if I did or not, but then I said to you, I'm like, how do you know that?
Mm.
Right? And then you had to sheepishly tell me that you were sitting across the street in that little side street with binoculars looking in the window of the store, and you saw that, right? Now, that behavior is what drew me to the partnership, right? Because that's who I want in a partner, is somebody that takes the business that seriously, right? And so we do the assignment in class is, how would you respond to a partner that treated you this way? Would you want to be partners with Mike's partner, Bob? And honest to God, it's about a 50-50 split on the answers.
Yeah.
50% are like, yeah, that's amazing. And then the other 50% are like, whatever. They're negative on that. And then I take the opportunity to say, like, okay, but like if you're negative about that, if you wouldn't want to be that person's partner, you don't like that level of intensity. I mean, startup's probably not for you.
Correct.
It's probably not for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I completely got it. I understood it. I appreciated it. I respected it. And I was going to be better because of it.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point.
Yeah.
So uncovering that stuff, I don't know how we uncovered that stuff in the walk, but I think somehow we did.
For sure. I mean, you had been working with Mary, who was also very intense. I mean, if a penny was missing from the drawer, she would tear apart the front line. And it was just a level of detail, a level of focus, a level of commitment that if you were to go up and down the strip of East Lansing and go into various retail operations, you wouldn't have seen it.
Never. No.
And you thrived on that, right? You thrived on that level. Now, I wanted to say, like, because it was a third, a third, and a third, right? So Mary and I were 50-50. And like if we were in Shark Tank, they would say, oh, well, why would you give up, a third of the business? And for me, always in my life, I've felt that when you know. Like, and when if you know, then you've got to act. Like, don't mess around. And this applies to something that shows up at Costco that I know that's not going to be there next week, to the marriage to my wife, to my partnerships, to so many things that I do, that when you can feel that the stars are aligned, don't mess around. Like, you've got to do it, and you've got to do it now, right? And I don't know what that is, that, aggregated intuition, maybe it's understanding where you're going, and so you understand the parts intuitively that are needed or whatever. I think I've always needed a partner in my life, and I know people are anti-partnership, but but I am not a whole person. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not whole on my own from a business perspective. I've always needed partnership. I've always needed teams. I've always needed company. I've always needed more to get whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And on that, that doesn't mean that every time you act on your intuition, it works perfectly.
No,
But
I've landed
by
on my ass
not
plenty.
by not acting on that
Yeah,
is you do miss significant opportunities,
yeah,
right? And there was a uh, sorry, I was going to go down a rabbit hole there. That's not relevant.
yeah,
I also think that there was a large component to, and this is proven out, so we can talk this way today.
yeah,
There's a real significant component to. I think we both sensed that we were good people, you know,
yeah,
and I think that that was really important too. Uh,
yeah,
and so, you know, I know that sounds like, why would you consider a business partnership? You know, I mean, but it's about character, right? It's about integrity. It's about, you know, living into what you promise, what you say. And you know, it took a while to gain all of that.
yeah.
I certainly don't think that in that handshake we knew that.
No,
But looking back on it, I think we both sensed that, right?
correct.
And that was also for me anyway, and I think for you, like, another reason why it felt right to do it,
Totally.
you know. Um, and you know, here we are talking about it 28 years later.
And you know, the question I've always had is not that it happened, because I know it happened. I was there, you know. The question I've always had is, why did it last?
Yeah.
You know, because so many partnerships, either through success or through major challenges, don't work out. You know, people get successful and they see the world differently, or there's so much pressure on them through failure that they see the world differently. And why has it lasted 28 years?
Well, one, I mean, just queuing off your how you started that is, this has been a slow roll. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, sure, we're 415 stores strong right now, and it is a successful organization. But I mean, you're talking 28 years, right?
Yeah.
So, but had we gone from, you know, one store to 400 in 18 months,
Yeah.
and there was just extraordinary amount of success and money and so on, I mean, we really have sort of knuckled through kind of every development, every, you know, change, every dime we've made. And so in it, and I know this sounds crazy, but it still feels like that today, right?
For sure.
And we're still working hard to get better and so on. So I think that's a piece of it, is that it was a relatively slow roll. But I also think that there's some things that when you go into a partnership, uh, you know, it's really important. And you said it earlier, I think we've always been honest and blunt,
Yeah.
right? Like, listen, this is how this is working for me. This is how this makes me feel. This is how, you know, we have conversations about things like feelings, you know, like, you know,
Yeah.
and we've really, I think we've been incredibly authentic about, you know, what's happening for us, what we need, asking for things for each other, from each other, supporting each other, you know, and to me, it's a relationship. It's not a business partnership with no feelings. It's not a financial transaction. I mean, this thing is our life.
Correct.
And you know, I observe a lot of people going into business as though it's primarily just a financial event. You know, they make an investment, they grow it, they scale it, they bring in equity, they, you know, and it's like, and it's all about taking that initial investment through to some exit, some liquidity event where they can walk away with their $40 million and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
And what I say to that is bullshit. I bullshit that 40 million doesn't make you happy.
No.
The relationships that we've created throughout this are powerful relationships in our life, right? And I think, you know, we weren't maybe in that space in the first 10 to 15 years, you know,
Yeah.
but it's really turned into that. I mean, if we look at relationships with farmers, relationships with franchise owners, I mean, how many CEOs go to their annual meeting and spend essentially 5 straight hours crying? I couldn't stop crying.
Yeah.
I went to Deb Kirchin's Lifetime Achievement Award presentation.
Yeah.
And I started crying in that. And then I went to the farmer's dinner, you know, shortly thereafter, and I couldn't stop crying. I mean, I was like, but the amazing thing was I wasn't embarrassed, you know, because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. And so I think that that's a huge piece of we both value that. We both value the relationships. We understand how important they are. And the fact that that's how we approach quote business is just so aligned. And so I think that that's a huge factor in terms of how we took whatever we learned in that walk and then began to build on that.
Totally. You know, I think too, it goes back to the two words legacy and loyalty. And I think it goes back to a values alignment, like two different people from two different places, whether, you know, it's a partnership in marriage, a relationship in marriage, or a partnership in business or whatever. Generally, if the values are aligned, they can mature in trust, they can remove doubt, they can feel safety. And all these things are really important. And I think of all the people, you know, the most, you know, I don't mind money, but I don't care a lot about it. Not a lot. You mean I like having it. There's no doubt about it. So I don't want to be slight on that. But we started this thing with $2,000 each, and now but the money has never been my primary driver. You know, you talked about liquidity events. You know, people talk about monetizing, and I get bored with that stuff. I'm interested in building, growing, seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, we're aligned there. I mean, people ask me like, why wouldn't you take a check? What the hell would I do? And I know that sounds weird, and I know you hear people say things like, "Well, I'll never retire," you know,
Yeah.
I'll die with my boots on," you know, that kind of. But yeah, it's more about this. So much of the inspiration in my life comes from this organization and the people in it. That if that were to go away, I would have an enormous void in my life, and I frankly don't think I could fill that. It would be hard to fill that. And so, yeah. And, you know, the liquidity event, it's like, I wouldn't live any differently than I live now. So why introduce this big void to basically have a very similar life, but just not all of the sort of meaning and satisfaction I get out of the organization.
I think that's the fundamental key. I mean, a liquidity event is a dopamine rush that will last you maybe 24 hours, maybe, you know, but this, what we've done, what we're doing, what we continue to do, that is the kind of dopamine rush that gets you out of bed every day with enthusiasm.
And somehow, in a 4-hour walk, you know, we learned enough
Yep.
about each other to make that level of a commitment, which,
Yeah.
you know, and I guess we got lucky to some degree. We're very fortunate, you know. I think these walks probably happen in the world often, but then it doesn't work out that way.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, well, that's the walk, you know, and the partnership, and you know, I think that I love that's our origin story. You know,
Me too.
when somebody asks, "Hey, what's your origin story?" Like, well, I got a doozy. I got a good one for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool. Well, it's meant everything to me.
yeah, me too. Me too. The but